Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Stacked, powered by FreightWaves SONAR. I'm your host, VP of Product Marketing at FreightWaves, Adam Robinson. On today's episode, I'm welcomed by Ed Stockman, CEO of newtrul, a freight aggregation platform. Today, Ed and I will have a discussion about the push towards digital transformation in freight, logistics, and the supply chain. We'll have a great discussion on how to define and think about digital transformation, the challenges involved, the technology's role in bringing the driver into the freight tech ecosystem, how technology is shortening the payment clock, the importance of interoperability in the tech stack, and finally, Ed's thoughts on what's next for the industry. So Ed, thanks for coming on to Stacked. It's really great to have you. As I do with all of my guests, I want to make sure our listeners get a sense of your background. So if you could tell us a little bit about your storied career in freight and freight technology, and what's this company that you started called newtrul?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me, Adam. Really hope I didn't need to write down all of those topics of conversation today. That was a pretty long list, but I have been in transportation and logistics for about 13 years. I started my career as an individual contributor and was fortunate enough to close, some of the enterprise clients, the Anheuser-Busch's, Unilever's, Procter's and Gamble's of the world, pretty early on. I was then able and fortunate enough to be able to manage a P&L for Redwood Logistics, where during the 4 years that I was there, we went through exponential growth, and it was just an incredible and interesting experience to learn from. Was introduced to different concepts and financial models that I wasn't privy to before then. So I think that that was one of the key moments there that really jump started my career and started getting me thinking about operational efficiencies, and which is the natural progression into technology and automation. But from there, I had the opportunity to join Transfix, a venture-backed digital freight brokerage, and during my 2.5 or so years there, we raised just about 80 million bucks and had a blast. Started newtrul about 2.5 years ago. newtrul is rather than a digital freight brokerage, I saw an opportunity to connect carriers to retailers, manufacturers, CPGs, as well as digital brokers. So we know that most of these folks are going out there today and marketing to owner operators via a mobile application. And I think that there's a disconnect with the mid-sized carriers, the large carriers, and the private fleets. They typically have a tremendous amount of waste involved in their procurement process. So an easy way to summarize what we do is kind of load board V2 for 2021 to better connect carriers with the available freight in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's really great to see the evolution of load boards and really making it more efficient. You can no longer just, have some of these legacy load boards out there where it's, post and pray, and hope that you get the right freight and hope that you find meaningful capacity. And, even on your website, you really state the value of newtrul to be, and I quote, booking transactional loads is an expensive and overly complicated process that relies on too many calls, emails, and website visits. So that pray mentality. And I like that, as it really hits at the heart of what freight technology is trying to do and should do: create efficiencies using automation, such as in the process of finding capacity, or as a broker or shipper, being able to get that right carrier that you need. And then you have to think about the other side, right? The carrier. They need to be able to find loads more efficiently so it's not so hard. And, that's seemingly the reason why we've seen a rise in some of these digital freight platforms like newtrul. So what would you say when someone asks you, what is digital freight matching? And would you say that newtrul is a digital freight matching platform? And why are you seeing more and more people kind of gravitate to companies like newtrul?
So I think digital freight matching has a wide variety of different definitions right now, depending on who you talk to. And I'm not necessarily implying my definition is the holy grail here, but the way that I view DFM, or digital freight matching, which is explicitly different than a digital freight broker, but digital freight matching to me, I believe, is a SaaS tool or a product that helps or enables the brokers or shippers go out and find carriers. So it's almost a tool that you would put in the toolbox for a carrier sales rep to go out there and more accurately target the right carrier that's supposed to be on that particular load. Now, what's happened over the last 10 years, 15 years, since the brokerage world and community has really evolved and taken off, has been most brokers that we see have 15, 20,000 carriers set up. So fundamentally, to think about the amount of cost and waste associated with going through even your private network of carriers is an insane process that takes hours, and any carrier rep out there will tell you how many calls they make and how many times they get hung up on a daily basis. So I think a DFM product is really meant to enable the carrier rep. In terms of what we're doing, so the second piece of your question was, do we think we're a digital freight matching platform? And I don't. I believe we're more of an aggregator than we are a DFM. We don't necessarily put tools in the hands of a carrier rep to go out there and source carriers easier. What we do is we put the tools in the hand of the carrier to have an Expedia or kayak like experience where they're able to search from a number of different sources within one particular platform. Uh, Regarding how it benefits or how a broker or shipper would interact with newtrul, they don't. So we don't change the workflows. We know that most, especially brokers, are very hesitant to make a change, and a change management is extremely difficult to manage, especially in transportation. So the product that we've developed, which has mainly been around our APIs and our integration, allows us to tap into our clients' TMS without changing their workflow at all. So I'd view us more as an aggregator, and most of the DFM products as more of SaaS type tools that very much enable the carrier rep to find more targeted tools for their carrier base.
Right. And so I think that's the difference. It really allows you to get maybe past it kind of makes it table stakes that this should be within your workflow already, as you said, integrated into those TMSs. And you're just really making it easier for them to source. And you and I've really talked a lot about this meaningful carrier density, right? It goes beyond just finding a carrier. It's about finding the right carrier and then maybe setting yourself up for success in the future, not being tactical, but really using your platform and other technology to be more strategic. So, when you say meaningful carrier density and you talk about that strategic standpoint, why is that important to think of it like that? Not just to find capacity, but meaningful, dense capacity.
Yeah, I think most folks out there are operating in the weeds on a day-to-day basis, and they walk into their office and or sit down at their desk, and they're already behind the curve for the day. There's already loads that they need to cover. There's already operational errors and issues and fires that they have to put out from the night before. So as soon as a carrier rep walks in and sits down at their desk, they have a wide variety of different issues that they need to deal with right off the bat. And you combine the different functions that a carrier rep is supposed to be doing on a daily basis with the fact that they have a tool and data on 20,000 carriers, it makes it very difficult for them to go ahead and do their job properly. And by doing their job, I'm talking about putting out those fires, dealing with the operations, making sure that their tractors or their trucks get picked up and delivered, that they're servicing their customer, finding carriers to book additional loads. Um, to manage and balance all of that is incredibly difficult. Is that a byproduct of them living off of that and having the post and pray mentality of we need to post all of our available shipments so we get inbound leads? And I very much take a marketing approach to this, which I'm sure you could relate to, is there's two different types of marketing. You could do inbound marketing, you could do outbound marketing. And I think for the most part, brokers have always revolved around outbound marketing, which has led to massive fragmentation amongst their network. What we think is a slightly different approach is to really examine your core carrier base. Of course, every broker knows their core carrier base and is really trying to figure out different ways to get stickier with that group. But how do you convert more of those 20 or 15,000 carriers into that core carrier base? And what are you doing to give the tools to your 15 or 20,000 carriers that allow them to operate in a unique way? Because we all know carriers don't operate in the same way. So that's where I think the inbound marketing piece of this is crucial, to give the tools to the carrier base. And the folks that we see using those types of tools are the ones that have 25, 50, 500 trucks because they need automation. They need to be able to identify and book a shipment quicker than they have in the past. Um, so I'm pretty convinced that there's probably about 2,500 to 3,000 carriers out there that every single broker should have that gives them access to about 60% of all the capacity on the road. And that alone is meaningful density within your network that hopefully you could develop strong relationships with, stop negotiating over $25 per transaction, help those carriers find loads, develop the bond and the relationship with them, and be able to increase the volume with them over time, in turn limiting your dependency on new carrier setups and the spray and pray traditional mentality.
Yeah, that's a lot like just, giving Google $10,000 and having no keyword strategy from my aspect, right? And just kind of hoping that one of those work out. But you have to get more intelligence. You have to be smarter. And I think one of the things that you mentioned, that, old legacy load board, you mentioned dat there. There's nothing wrong with using the available tools on the market, but at some point, when do we start challenging our assumptions of what works and what doesn't? We have to almost be obsessively paranoid that we're going to be displaced, that we're going to lose market share, and that we have to start thinking about, especially in 2021, where we have an explosion of freight technology tools out there, which tools are going to get me to my desired outcomes. And when we're in such a volatile market that we are in today, you've got to be able to really start maturing your tech stack and really thinking about the role of each component within it. Then there's this other aspect. And I think this is what you guys did in a very genius move, and what Gartner talks to us about. Being able to get your platform, which helps inform decision making, which helps bring in that meaningful, dense capacity, which makes things more automated and more efficient, not only for the broker and shipper, but also the carrier. That you partnered really quickly via API to get your information, your platform, right inside some existing platforms where you don't have to get another login, right? You don't have this tech fatigue. You're already using things like McLeod, which you guys have integrated into to really reach that freight broker market. You then went over to MercuryGate, which is one of the biggest market shares of enterprise shippers out there. So that shippers and logistics service providers that MercuryGate serves are able to really start using newtrul and see the value right away. And I think that's the future that allows for less tech fatigue, but really making the tech stack interoperable so that they can inform decisions and really leveraging, that API. So why did you go about this strategy early on? Are you seeing a lot of benefits to that? And what do you think about interoperability between the freight tech stack in general?
So the moves to integrate with those folks, and I guess rewinding a little bit, because I think that the very first part of your couple of comments there was around when do we see this shift in mentality. And I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball. If you have the answers, please let me know. But I think we run across this all day, every day in the sales process. It's folks out there that, especially in the brokerage world, shippers I think are a little bit more forward thinking for the most part than brokers, uh, at least generally speaking. They need to move their freight, they need to service their clients, and they know that that's the core of their business. Brokers, I think, have a slightly different mentality in that they can operate at the status quo. And there's your handful of folks that are actively looking to invest in technology and automate some of their processes. And there's others that are very content with their margins in today's market. They're growing. They see new customer contracts coming in. They see their load volume increasing, and they see their margins healthy. So why change? So I don't have a clear answer for when that mentality will shift. I completely agree with you that it's 2021. There are plenty of tools. Look at the VC money that has come into the space in the last couple of years. The industry is getting better. If you as a broker are not getting better, then you're behind at this point. Because we know that the evaluation of these tools, the implementation of these tools, take months. So I would certainly encourage those folks out there to start doing some diligence, to start having these conversations and setting up demos, Be mindful of the folks out there that are charging SaaS subscription fees. I'm a huge believer that the two businesses need to be aligned with how they bill and the business model. Um, so just make sure that you're not spending money on something that doesn't yet yield you results. But if you could hedge against that, what is the risk? What's the downside? And I think brokers have a huge opportunity to leverage some of those tools and get better. Regarding Mercury Gate and McLeod, there's a very common theme out there, especially in the investor world, that talks about network effects. And if you've ever seen the movie like a Social Network, or when you look at some of these Facebooks and LinkedIn's and how these types of companies evolve, it's because one person invites the other, and then the other person invites the other, and then and it's a massive spider web that grows very quickly and spreads like wildfire. One of our core concepts with aggregation is allow those different folks to invite each other. And when a broker onboards new carriers, chances are those carriers are already in neutral. They're already connected to other clients. They're already searching and booking freight for other clients. And that's where we start seeing the overlap and the network effects really truly play out, which adds a ton of value to our carrier clients of being able to search through multiple different shippers and brokers in one centralized place, which already happens offline on the DATs of the world, but they do it in an analog way. They pick up the phone and they negotiate. So we're really trying to just digitize that process and give the carriers those tools. One way to do that was eliminate the need to integrate with every single individual client that we onboard, and that's a business model in itself. There's a fintech company, not sure if you've heard of them, Plaid, who Visa tried to acquire, and Plaid has an incredibly interesting business model of purely connecting the consumer to the bank account, and making sure that any application can leverage Plaid's pipelines. And rather than going out and integrating with 50 different McLeod clients, if we can have that integration supported and a partnership with McLeod, where we could just go ahead and flip a switch, do a little bit of customization, and knock out an integration in a couple of weeks versus months, obviously that gets us to a point where network effects are starting to take place much, much quicker. So it was really about speed and velocity.
And less friction at the end of the day. Yeah, because I remember at Ceresis, LTL TMS, and um, we'd get big clients on, and the integration into maybe it be their ERP or maybe their e-commerce shopping cart or whatever it was would always take the longest before we saw any revenue. It was a value add as a part of what we offered, because I think that's critical. If you want to get the business, hey, get them using our system a little bit stickier. You give away that integration because you want them long term, and that's where you get your money. But imagine like what Plaid's doing if it was just already there, and that's going to require a lot of that interoperability, more partnerships. And I think we'll continue to see more partnerships. We'll continue to see bigger acquisitions. I mean, Blue Yonder just got gobbled up by Panasonic. When I was 5, I thought that was just a TV maker. Apparently they got a lot going on, and that's a couple of bills, $6 billion. So lot of opportunity, to bring some of these big tech platforms together and really create efficiency, but really that automation standpoint. And I know for about the past 5 to 6 years, automation was seen as something that companies needed to quickly have, but increasingly it's really table stakes. And more and more people in freight are gaining really big returns on investment when they have these automated workflows that are occurring natively in these platforms, or when two platforms do come together, as we've been talking here, to do very specialized tasks. So you all feature some automation within newtrul, and I'd love to hear your perspective over your career on when automation is effective versus when it's not. Is there a point where automation isn't always necessary and human execution is still critical? Does automation have its place, and where is that in freight?
I think it's a great question, and I think it's something that specifically in our industry folks struggle with. I think a lot of people get scared about automation, and they get scared about replacing jobs, and that this is such a trustworthy industry, and vertical transportation. Like there's the table stakes of of hiring the wrong carrier and having the liability associated with something along those lines, or a fatality or an accident when it comes to the financial repercussions or the brand name repercussions. You're talking about a lot of liability when it comes to transportation and trucking. So I think that level of trust within partners has to be there. It's incredibly crucial. But I think that there's two main different types of automation. One to, and you brought this up, is there a human execution element there? And you know this from the Sonar platform. Sonar automates, it pulls in a lot of different data. It gives the tools necessary for people to make better educated, informed decisions. But those people are still making the decisions at the end of the day. And there is, rather than necessarily automation in terms of replacing humans, it's automation enablement for the human. And and when I think about the next, at least, the short term outlook, 5 to 6 years or so, I think we're going to see a lot more enablement tools, automation enablement tools to help individuals, because at the end of the day, this is a relationship based industry. The trust factor is probably one of the, if not the most important variables on a day to day business perspective. And the more resources one has at their disposal, the better decisions they're able to make and lower and reduce costs and liability and so on and so forth. I think when it comes to full blown automation and potentially replacing individuals or drivers for that matter, I think we're probably a ways away from that, at least just in terms of my dealings on a day to day basis. Most people aren't willing to have a digital booking online, let alone go ahead and subscribe to any type of significant automation platform that has the potential of replacing individuals within their firm. So I think the human resistance will actually be a major barrier for full automation in the next 5 years.
Yeah, it's all about augmentation, right? Maybe that's the right word. Is that automation is a great augmentation to humans and getting more strategic. We never, like, I don't want to go out and do certain things that just make me feel good, but they're really just process stuff. They're not really adding much value. They're repetitive. And if we can get some of that repetitive manual analog stuff out of our daily work, hey, we can focus on bigger picture issues like planning and strategically repositioning our network. Or hey, if you're a freight broker and traditionally maybe you've just been a tactical load coverer for your shippers, and Anheuser-Busch gives you 4% and they give another broker 8%, and everybody says they've helped Anheuser-Busch, and they're really just trying to get the best deal out there. How do they need to go away from that tactical relationship and start thinking more strategically? I know I've talked to a lot of freight broker CEOs over the last few months who are starting to use technology as a competitive advantage, not just to make them more efficient and reduce operational costs, which helps their margins, helps their bottom line, but how to improve that customer experience. And so that's a fat word, right? I can say, oh, technology helps you improve customer experience. But what I mean by that is if you're a freight broker and you can start going up to the order level and start getting your shipper customer to think about, hey, let's think about your inbound side with the procurement team. Are you talking to them? Are you having conversations about their flexibility? We're in a really tight market. Can they do something different? Or work with the sales folks who are on the outbound side and have that same conversation. You can start thinking about your freight profile and your shipping modes and really start thinking strategically together and collaboratively with your internal team. And then on the other part, you can then work with those carriers to kind of bring them into that process. And then finally, what technology's role can be in that conversation with those parties is around a shared single truth of data and analytics. And that's what we're doing at Sonar, right? We're trying to help inform that decision making so that people can use data and analytics, just like you might do in marketing programs, to say, hey, this did give us a return on our investment, or this is something we want to spin up. We have a new product. We can now support that because we have enough data to show that our prior campaigns worked. And that's no different in freight today. And I think we're about to live in a great world now where machine learning and algorithms are all working together in the pursuit of making humans better decision makers. That gives them higher profits at the end of the day. So, what's next beyond digital freight enablement tools, that enablement word? What will the future look like in maybe a year from now when the market is data rich, automated, and hyper efficient? What do you think's in the future for us, Ed?
So I don't have specific examples outside of the obvious ones like autonomous trucking, uh, and those types of maybe examples that are a little bit further out than 1 year. But where I believe the market will head is probably into something that creates multiple different categories. And I don't really know what those categories are. It could be, I mean, last in the last couple of years, we've gone from digital freight brokers to digital freight matching to aggregation platforms, and TMSs are trying to absorb some of this and roll these features out. And where I see the evolution is a lot of new categories which potentially has the ability to further fragment the industry and to drive parties apart. And that's I think one of my fears around the influx of VC money into this space is 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it was dial for dollars, find the best carrier to haul this particular load, develop a relationship with them, take them out to lunch, take them out to dinner, and let's get to know that carrier so we can do more business with them. It's pretty clear cut and dry. Now, with the evolution of the digital freight broker, everybody has to rethink their strategy, which a lot of people are getting pretty creative with. And the TMSs are also getting creative with. There's ELDs that have popped up in the last couple of years. So I think the amount of spin-offs off of these couple of concepts, digital freight brokers, digital freight matching, ELDs, TMSs, so on and so forth, I think I think we'll see a lot of new categories and carriers having options to log into even more platforms. So part of my bet is that the market continues to fragment itself, and a lot of the solutions that are aiming to defragment certain components are actually counterproductive, and there is a higher need and more need for an aggregator in the marketplace. That's at least my bet, but we'll definitely see where things go. But I'm super excited to see some of these new entrants into the marketplace. Truck parking is a problem, and just seeing all of the new innovation and this whole wave of disruption coming in is fascinating to see.
Yeah, I think that's such a solid point, and one that some might forget that it's pretty exciting and fun to work at the center of technology and freight. But are we really creating a monster that we can't rein in? And I love that word aggregation, and I think you're doing some really smart things aggregating and looking at the future and kind of being a little bit paranoid about that, fragmentation a little bit. I think that makes you a pretty smart man. So Ed, really appreciate you coming on today to Stacked and kind of sharing your wisdom and telling our audience a little bit about newtrul and having them think about the future, especially in the world of freight and aggregation. So before I let you go, where can the audience learn a little bit more about newtrul?
Yeah, and thank you for having me on, Adam. This was a blast. Definitely appreciate it. In terms of where they can find us, feel free to head over to newtrul.com. We also have a broker resource center on our site. So anybody just getting into the industry, anybody looking to brush up on their skills, please head over to the resource center. I hope you find it meaningful.
Well, thanks for coming on, Ed. And as Ed said, check them out at newtrul.com. That's newtrul.com. Really cool spelling. So, for all of our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in each week. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you on the next episode of Stack.